Hey friends, it's Lucas here. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I had an interesting experience a couple weeks ago that just got me really thinking how it's fascinating that you never can be quite sure when you're going to say something that might be life changing for the person that heard it. It started a couple weeks ago when I posted a video. It was a video that I really didn't want to post. I wasn't happy with it. I didn't like the storyline. I didn't like the flow. My speaking was not where I thought it should be. It felt a little bit, in a weird way, self-aggrandizing, and I just wasn't totally happy with it. But it was a long video, and I had already shot it, and the day was getting old. I had lost my light outside already, and I didn't have a video to post that day. But I had this one created, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. It's like, if it's bad, who cares, right? I mean, not all videos are good. In fact, several are quite bad, and that's okay. So I decided to post it. And I didn't really think anything about it after I clicked upload. Until the next day, something really interesting started happening. I logged onto my social media the day after I posted that video, and I noticed somebody had shared it. It was this guy that I know him a little bit, just a little bit, and I knew from some of his recent social posts that he was having a little bit of a rough time. And he had shared my video. And the only message he gave me, the only note or anything on it was on his share. He said, "Thanks for the message." I went on with my day, and I didn't really think too much about it until later on. I got a notification on my phone from Facebook Messenger, and it was somebody else who was responding to my video and saying, "Thank you for posting that. I really needed to hear that today." And then I got another notification on Facebook Messenger. It was a video message from somebody I'd never even met from Estonia. It was a really long, wonderful message about how impactful this video had been and how some of the things I had said had helped this lady through some very difficult stuff. And I started to think, isn't that fascinating how this video that I almost didn't post, this video that I almost didn't share, is getting attention, and it's getting attention because people are needed to hear what I said. And it was interesting to me because I kept getting messages. I got another message from somebody, a family friend who I haven't seen for several years, who lives in another province, and she sent me a message along the same lines to the one that I got from the lady in Estonia. "Thank you for posting this. I really needed to hear this." And then I got a note from another friend of mine, kind of my adopted sister. Again, "Thank you for posting this. I'm so glad you're sharing this message. It's so important for people to hear this." Then I kind of stepped back for a minute and I thought, okay, something I said in that must have been important. Something I said in that was valuable for people. It's obviously having an impact. But I didn't really know exactly the impact it was having until I got a note from one other note on Facebook. And it was from the mother of the guy who shared my video on that first day. She detailed in her note how he had been having some struggles and how he had been dealing with some issues and going through some stuff. And he saw my video, and she said in her note that she wasn't exactly sure what it was about the video that shifted for him, but she wasn't exactly sure how it impacted him. But for some reason, after he had seen my video, he was starting to take more action, and he was starting to do things again, and he was starting to sort out some of the issues he was having. He was starting to slowly work his way out of a depression. That's how I knew that there was something in that was powerful, and there was something important. And then I got to thinking about how it's so fascinating in life that sometimes we'll say something. Just say it. It doesn't even seem to matter that much. But to the person who hears it, it's totally life-changing. It's just a passing thought for us, but for somebody else who needed to hear exactly what it was that we said, it changes everything. About 6 or 7-ish years ago, I was out for a walk with my cousin. We were getting ready for this camping trip, and we're walking along by the river. It was like a Thursday afternoon or something. And we were discussing all this stuff we had to get ready for the camping trip. We had to get the firewood. We had to pick up our food. We had to make sure we had enough fuel for our stove. We had to get all this stuff in order so that we could leave. And we were planning to leave Friday, the next day, right after work. So we wanted to have things ready. And at one point I turned to my cousin and I said, "John, don't worry about it. We'll take care of all of it tomorrow after work on our way out of town. It'll be fine." And as those words came out of my mouth, something really interesting happened. As I said that sentence, I heard a bicycle bell ring behind me, and I turned around, and there's this cyclist who had been following behind us, who at that moment pulled out and started to pass us. But as he did, he slowed right down. And he turned, and he faced me, and he stared right at me. It was almost like he was looking right into my soul, and he said, "That which you leave for tomorrow never gets done." Then he turned back, and he rode off into the distance. I never saw him again. It was a really interesting moment, and to him it was just like a passing thing. Probably it was like, hey, he heard us talking about procrastinating, he said this one thing, and he carried on with his life. But 6 years later, 7 years later, however long ago it was, I still find myself thinking about that guy. I still find myself thinking about when I decide to leave stuff for the next day. I still hear that guy's voice in the back of my head saying, "That which you leave for tomorrow never gets done." And it's definitely not cured my procrastination. I wish it had cured my procrastination. But what it's done is it's made me conscious of it. And it's made me realize that I need to ask an important question every time I decide to procrastinate. And that important question is, can I be okay with it if this doesn't get done? And if the answer is no, then I have to do it right away. I have to take action immediately, because like that guy said, that which you leave for tomorrow never gets done. It was just so interesting to me how this one little moment and this one little insignificant phrase that this guy had said, which probably didn't seem important to him at all. He probably questioned whether or not he should even say it. Like, how often do you just randomly talk to strangers as you ride by them on a bicycle? Almost never. And yet he did. And it had a massive impact on my life going forward. There was another time about 2.5 or so years ago when it was a lot more, well, I can't say more impactful, but it was even more obvious how important it sometimes it is to say things even when you're not sure if you should. I was at this workshop in April of 2018, and it was a speaking workshop. We were doing all kinds of activities and exercises. It was a really, really awesome time. And for part of the workshop, we were broken up into teams because there's just too many people in the main session to be able to give enough individual attention and practice time to everybody. And on my team, there was 7 or 8 women and one other guy. His name was Anton. I'll never forget him. We bonded over the fact that we were the only 2 guys on our team, but we didn't really talk much. You know, we gave each other some feedback on our stories we were telling. We helped each other through the exercises a little bit, but that was really it. There was no reason that we should become friends. There was really not a lot that we had in common. I had a ton of respect for this guy because he was the kind of guy that I sort of aspired to be like. You know, he had lived a really adventurous life. He had a lot of really cool stories to tell, and stuff like that. But at that point, we didn't have much in common. Anyway, one day, it was like the 3rd or 4th day, it was lunchtime, and I was sitting by myself over the lunch break meditating, because I'm an introvert. You might not know that about me if you don't know me well, but when I've been around people for a long period of time, I need to take some time for myself. I need to take my time to recharge. And here I was on 3 days of a 5-day workshop around people, intensively expending a lot of my energy and really badly needing a recharge. So I was sitting there by myself meditating at lunch, recharging, and Anton came and sat down. He didn't say anything. He just sat down in the chair next to me. It was like it was in a hotel ballroom, the hallway outside of a hotel ballroom. You know, it was a very generic kind of place, right? There's just 2 chairs tucked away in this little cubby. And he sat down, and I felt his presence immediately, but he didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, and I just sat there. And slowly, I sort of started coming back to the room and started bringing my consciousness back to the space around me, and I opened my eyes, and I looked at him, and he smiled at me. I smiled back at him, and we started to talk. It started out, it was just idle chit-chat in the hallway, but then it turned really deep. And he looked at me. He got this look in my eyes. He said, "I've been observing you, and there's something that I need you to know." And I looked at him kind of weird. I said, "Okay." He said, "Now, forgive me if this is too forward, but I've been observing you, and I've noticed that you have an incredible energy. You have this presence that when you walk into a room, it fills the whole room. You have this light and this warmth that you give off, and people just feel it everywhere you go. It's amazing. I was kind of taken aback. It was the first time anybody had ever told me that or pointed that out about me, and I was a little puzzled as to what to do with that observation. But then he kept talking. And he said, "Forgive me for assuming, but I have a feeling that you're the kind of person who doesn't make friends very easily." He said, "I have a feeling that you're the kind of person who's kind of felt a little bit lonely and outcast for most of your life. I have a feeling you're the kind of person who thinks a lot of people don't really like you that much." And as I'm sitting there, I'm just like, holy crap, who told this guy every single one of my insecurities? He was hitting everything. I felt like an outcast my entire life. Up until that point, I could count my friends on one hand. I was terrified to talk to people. I was terrified to talk to strangers, and I truly did believe that nobody really liked me unless they had a use for me. Unless I was working for them or providing them some kind of service. I was just another human. And he said, "There's something you need to know." I looked at him kind of curious again. He said, "The energy that you have is massive, and it is powerful, and it's intense. And you're a big guy. I'm 6'4", and at that time I weighed 300 or so pounds, 280 pounds. I'm a very, very big person." He said, "You have a physically imposing presence, and you bring a powerfully intense energy. The problem is that people who don't know you don't understand that that powerful, intense energy is good and that it's warm and it comes from a gentle, giving place. And they think because you're a big and intimidating and physically imposing guy, they're scared of you." I was kind of puzzled. I said, "They're scared of me." He said, but I'm not dangerous." He said, "I know. And you know that. And people who get to know you know that. But people who just first meet you only feel your energy and see you and see the intensity of the expressions on your face. And they don't have the opportunity to get to know you, and then they don't approach you because they're nervous. You intimidate people that you don't know, and you don't realize it." And I sat there, I was kind of stunned, and it was so interesting because suddenly so many things from my life made sense. Suddenly, the fact that when I walked into a room, people had a little bit of a tendency to back away and start looking at me from a distance. People often seemed to look at me, and I always thought they were talking about me behind my back. I always thought they were talking about how much they didn't like me or how whatever flaw it was that I was particularly insecure about that particular day. Never in a million years did I think it was because they were nervous of me and that they wanted to come and say hi and approach me, and that they wanted to get to know me, but they were intimidated. And then he said something really fascinating that changed my life forever. He said, "You need to know that you're a powerful person in this world and you're going to do great things, but you also need to understand that the onus is on you. The onus is on you to approach the world because the world is not going to approach you. They're scared, they're nervous, they're intimidated. But as soon as you start approaching the world, as soon as you let people know who you are and that you're not dangerous and that your energy is good and it's powerful and it's intense, yes, but it's a good, warm, loving, caring energy, suddenly the world is going to start responding to you differently. And you may find some things in your life start to shift." I thought that was so interesting. And our conversation unfortunately got cut short, and it was the last conversation I've ever had face-to-face with Anton. But it got me thinking, and it changed the way I was approaching the world. I started making an effort to go and talk to people and to get to know people and to let them get to know me. And I took the responsibility, I took the onus of putting myself out there into the world and introducing myself and letting the world see me for who I was, not from this powerful, intense, imposing presence that I gave off at first, but the real me, the person behind that. And things did start to shift. Since then, I've made more friends than I can count. I have friends from all over the world. It's amazing. I've learned to connect with people in a way I never did before. I've had romantic relationships for the first time in my life, which I never was able to do because I was always afraid to connect with people. And I always had this idea that people didn't want to connect with me or didn't want to talk with me. And that all changed just from this one conversation I had with a guy that I've never seen since. It's fascinating. Because when I think about Anton, I think, there's a chance that he remembers me. There's a chance that he remembers who I was. And there's even a chance that he remembers the conversation we had. But I know for sure that he has no idea how impactful that conversation was in my life. I know for sure that he has no idea how important it was for him to sit down and say those things to me at that day. It was an uncomfortable thing for him to do, to approach somebody who was essentially a stranger and give unsolicited advice of that intensity like that. And yet it was one of the greatest gifts anybody's ever handed me. I think about that cyclist sometimes too, and I think, here's a guy out there riding his bike who doesn't know my name, doesn't know who I am, doesn't even probably know that I exist. And yet one sentence, the only sentence he's ever said to me and ever will say to me, in all likelihood, there's a chance I'll run into him again, but I doubt it. But the only sentence he ever said to me profoundly impacted my life, profoundly shifted my perspective, and profoundly adjusted the way that I was living. Then I got thinking about that video the other day, I think that a couple weeks ago that I almost didn't post, that I was nervous to post, that I don't know why I didn't want to post it. There was some level of perfectionism, some level of imposter syndrome, something about it that said, something in the back of my mind just said, it's not that important. People don't need to hear it. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. And I was lucky enough to hear from some of the people that it mattered to. And that is powerful, because most of the time we don't get the opportunities to have those feedback, or to get that feedback. And that's a shame, because so many times in life, you'll say something that is profoundly important to somebody. You might even save their life. And you'll never even know you said it. You'll never even know what it was. So many people go through life thinking they have nothing important to say, thinking that nobody wants to hear from them, thinking that they've got nothing worth sharing. And the fact of the matter is, you do. Every single person on this planet knows something that could be life-changing for somebody else to find out. It's that simple. You're brilliant in ways you haven't even considered yet. But you have to say the things that are on your mind. You have to put things out there into the world. You have to be okay with imperfection. You have to be okay with saying things that might offend somebody. You have to be okay with being yourself and being who you are. Because if you're not okay with saying the things that are on your mind, if you're not okay with sharing your thoughts, if you're not willing to say things that might offend people or any of that, you might be depriving somebody of a life-changing lesson. You might be depriving somebody of an opportunity that you haven't even considered. You might even be depriving somebody of something that could shift their perspective enough that could make them want to do things differently and pull themselves out of a dark place and pull themselves out of a depression. And maybe they decide not to kill themselves. Maybe they decide to go and start a business that they've always been too scared of, and they go on to be massively wealthy and donate crazy amounts of money to an important cause and really cause impact in the world. And maybe if you didn't say that one thing, maybe it would never happen. I guess the point of all this is sometimes you're going to feel like you don't have anything to say, and that's okay. It happens. It happens to me all the time. But I want to remind you that even when you feel like you have nothing to say, even when it feels like what you have to say isn't important, even when it feels like nobody's listening to you, you have to talk anyway. You have to share your thoughts. You have to share your wisdom. You have to share your ideas with the world. Because there's only one of you, and there's only one person that has your perspective, and there's somebody out there that is waiting to hear your exact perspective on something. And you just never know what's going to come out of it. So don't hide. Don't avoid putting yourself out there into the world, because you just never know whose life you're going to change and whose life you're going to improve. It's an important concept, and I deal with it a lot lately as I work with speakers and I work with other content creators, and I try to encourage other people to share their message. And I hear it way too often. I just don't have anything to say. Nobody wants to hear from me. And it's just not true. Somebody wants to hear from you. Somebody needs to hear what you have to say. And As long as you're not saying it, you're doing not only the world, but yourself an incredible disservice. You never know when you're going to say something that's totally life-changing for yourself or somebody else. So, stop wasting time not saying it.